So just before we get started here today, I do want you to know that this video was meant to be a like a multi-part, multi-act thing where I did like a separate location for each kind of piece, but my whole country's kind of in lockdown right now, so it's not bad. Now onto the topic of today's video, where we talk about what we see in our heads when we hear stand-up comedy. Now, my guess right off the bat is that it's some kind of middle-aged white dude. He's on a stage, he's wearing jeans. There's like almost nothing on the stage, probably just like a stool with a water bottle on it for some reason, and a mic stand that he takes the mic out of at the beginning of the show, and then just like leaves the empty mic stand in the middle of the stage for some reason for the whole show. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, and I'm starting to find it increasingly weird that one of the oldest forms of televised performance ever, that is undergoing so much change with the rise of platforms like Netflix and HBO, that are allowing all sorts of comics from all over the world in all shapes and sizes distribute their artistic vision, that, as far as we're concerned, all stand-up comedy pretty much looks the same. Here's what the first zombie movie looked like. Here is what the first sitcom looked like. Now, how is it that these genres, which have been around for at least as long, if not shorter than stand-up comedy, have evolved so much over time, whereas traditional stand-up comedy has changed barely at all? So I want to talk a little bit about that today, and the reasons that I think stand-up might be on the brink of a new era, and in particular talk about one of the people driving it, and that's Burnham. First, a little history though. Now, stand-up evolved in the early to mid-1800s out of mostly United States minstrel and vaudeville acts, and these acts would often involve the performer taking on some kind of crude ethnic stereotype and then playing out a bunch of like racist stuff. I mean, you've seen the blackface, the jazz singer, you know what I'm talking about.
Give me a situation, you'd have to put me through a simple self-examination.
No, stupid. You mean a civil service examination?
Now, luckily, once stand-up made it to television, when that technology was evolved, it had pretty much gotten all of the weird racial stuff out of its system.
But that was 2 weeks ago! You must have a key made!
Okay, well, I mean, that was the 50s. We've evolved a lot in our thinking about other people since then. We're about to cut to something that disproves that.
Okay. You will need to have a witness. We're gonna supply one for $100.
Anyway, so stand-up comedy has been a part of mainstream TV pretty much since mainstream TV has existed, most famously in the Tonight Show, which started in 1954. Now, in the 60s, stand-up actually started becoming a bona fide path to legitimate stardom, with comics like Lenny Bruce and George Carlin bursting onto the scene. Fun fact, by the way, the Grammy for Best Comedy Album was introduced in 1959, and then Bill Cosby went on to win it for 6 consecutive years from 1965 through 70. A period during which he is accused of raping at least 9 people. So, cool. Now, the LA nightclub The Hungry Eye played a huge part in the early careers of both Lenny Bruce and Bill Cosby, and apparently its bohemian-inspired design became the original source for the most pervasive and most tired cliche in comedy, the brick wall.
Oh, check this out. Black guys drive a car like this. Ding, ding. Yeah, but white guys, see, they drive a car like this.
I'm Mo, or as the ladies like to call me, hey, you behind the bushes.
Did you ever notice how men always leave the toilet seat up?
Have you noticed how North Edinburgh golfers putt like this? And South Edinburgh golfers putt like this?
And then on the very final day of 1975, HBO made history by airing the first ever comedy special, which was a 1-hour performance by Robert Klein at Haverford College. Now, incredibly, I actually managed to find some footage of this show, and despite the 480p and the 3:4 aspect ratio, 4:3? Now, incredibly, I actually managed to find some footage of this show, and despite the 480p aspect ratio, Christ. And despite the 480p aspect ratio and the 480p aspect ratio, and despite the 480p and the 4:3 aspect ratio and more importantly the sweater, I think it's still worth having a look at. Now, what I want you to notice in particular is just how similar this first ever comedy special in 1975 is to just about all of the stand-up comedy we see today. He's got the spotlight on the stage, he's got the jeans, he's got the empty mic stand, he's even got the stool with the water on it. Now, there's actually a bit of a parallel here to recorded music. You see, in the earliest days of recorded music, the recording was simply meant to be a reproduction of the live event, essentially what we see with stand-up. It's the incidental recording of a performance that is primarily to be played live to people, which is the way that music had been performed forever. But sometime in the kind of early mid-20th century, as these audio recording formats became more pervasive and more popular, there occurred a bit of a change where musicians started going to studios and recording music primarily for their albums and in controlled conditions, and then we saw a kind of a switch around where live shows are now intended to be as accurate a recreation of the recordings as opposed to the recordings just being an accurate recreation of the live shows. Now, this switch never really happened with stand-up comedy. We are still today seeing incidental recordings of live shows with audiences, just as we always have. Now, I want to take a quick sidebar to say that I'm by no means just shitting on the entire genre of stand-up comedy here. I love stand-up, I really do. I watch a lot of it. But it just baffles me that this art form, this televised medium that's existed for stand-up for more than half a century is still pretty much exactly the same as 2020 as it was on The Tonight Show in 1954. Now, I'm no stand-up industry insider, but I do have kind of one tentative theory about why the genre might be like this, and I'm going to quickly run through that before we get into the people who are shaking things up. Now, even without any real encounters with the industry itself, even I've managed to pick up a kind of weird traditional puritanism that seems to go particularly along with a lot of the older stand-ups. In fact, in a review of Drew Michaels' new comedy special in the New York Times, the critic Jason Zinnemann actually warns this segment of the stand-up viewing public about the unconventional nature of the new special. Such ambition is the sign of a maturing art form, but it's also elicited a grumbling backlash, with some rightly saying that some of these innovations are distracting gimmicks at odds with the timeless simplicity of the art of stand-up. Bo Burnham, who we will get to in just a minute by the way, also made reference to this section of the community in a 2011 appearance on the Green Room with Paul Provenza.
Yeah, the biggest reason people give me shit is since I came on the internet, they said that I didn't get enough criticism. I wasn't in the clubs grinding it out. But the truth is, for the older comics that say that, I want them to read 10,000 internet comments and see if they don't feel fully criticized. After that, I mean...
Now, a lot of people, some of whom are probably watching this video right now, see stand-up as kind of the last bastion of a pure art form. There's no frills, no gimmicks, it's just a comic and an audience. I can definitely sympathise with this mentality, with the stool, water, mic, spotlight, medium being the kind of lowest you can get things without having technical issues. But I worry that these constraints that we're putting on this industry are choking off a lot of really cool, artistic things that we could be seeing that we're not, because the industry is so focused on this one format. Now, Robert Pickering Burnham is an American comedian, producer, director, songwriter, and poet? Oh, you forgot actor. Now, Bo, who incidentally got his start right here on early YouTube in 2006, has quite a unique style, and I'm not going to go through all of that here, because better videos have been done about him. But just for the purposes of this video, I'm going to focus in on a couple of things that he does that I think could be really cool if they caught on. Man, this bitch is long. Now, if we're talking about how Bo breaks the stand-up comedy mold, the obvious thing to go for might be his music. Like, how many musical comics do you see? I mean, there's like him and Tim Minchin and sometimes Dimitri Martin, but that's about it. But for the purposes of this video, I'm not actually going to talk about his music really that much. One, because I think it's a bit obvious, and I'd rather talk about lots of other cool stuff that he does. And secondly, because I don't think the musical comedy part of his act is something that's really likely to catch on among, you know, Seinfeld doing musical comedy. Now, first I want to take a look at the closer from Bo's Netflix opus, Make Happy. The song, called Can't Handle This, is a rambling 7-minute monologue inspired by Kanye West's famous mid-concert auto-tune rants. Now, there have already been entire videos breaking down just this 7 minutes, so I'll spare you the details around the lyrics and the themes and all the rest of it, and just present you with the most striking part of the performance, particularly given what we're talking about here. I've never ever seen anything like this in a comedy show, and I think stand-ups looking for a bit of dramatic and thematic punch should really pay attention to what he's doing here. Now, again, without boring you with a whole bunch of details, this song goes into the pressure that Bo sometimes feels as a result of his success, and the fact that his anxiety often overwhelms him on stage, culminating in actual mid-performance panic attacks. Now, throughout the song, as Bo's anxiety worsens, the lights get more and more intense until they eventually isolate him completely. He's bathed in the spotlight here, but also blinded by it. These theatrics, it kind of goes without saying now, are pretty much entirely unique in the world of stand-up, particularly back in 2016. These kind of... Fuck's sake. Sorry if the framing just changed, by the way. My camera died. Alright, levels. What was I talking about? Now, these theatrics, it kind of goes without saying at this point, are pretty much unprecedented, totally unique in the world of stand-up, particularly back in 2016 when this special was released. Yeah, interestingly, he was fooling around with this stuff in yet earlier specials, like back in 2013, in particular with this song, Left Brain, Right Brain. The song, in which Bo's left and right brain are separated so that they can argue with each other, it makes more sense in context, features very dramatic lighting cues that separate the dialogue at each side of Bo's brain. Bo's unusual techniques don't just stop at songs and dramatic lighting either. He's also utilised disembodied voices, confetti throwing, and even non-sequitur poetry sections.
And me, eating that pussy, baby. Thank you so much.
Sometimes even strays into jokes that only work on camera or in person, thus kind of fucking the concept of the comedy album.
CD people are confused.
Now, I've always kind of suspected that Bo is like this because his origins aren't in stand-up, they're in music and theatre, and this suspicion was actually confirmed when I came across an interview while researching this video.
And the whole thing with this show, which my other shows had tried to do, you know, I did theater my whole life, and that's what I was interested in. I wasn't interested in stand-up. I don't feel at home in the world of stand-up. I like the people in it, but like when I would go to a comedy club, I'd be like, what is, like this place is not for me. Like brick walls and 2-drink minimums and but truly, like this is not where I feel at home. So it was always sort of trying to wrestle the things I loved about theater into stand-up, which was, you know, staging and lighting and things like that.
And the really cool thing is, even though Bo hasn't made a special in a few years, he's actually starting to export his style to other comedians and providing them with a similar kind of dramatic flair and performativeness. Bo has just 2 directing credits under his belt for works he didn't also write. Gerard Carmichael's 8 and Chris Rock's Tambourine, both stand-up specials. You can see just from the trailers of these specials that they bring some of Bo's aesthetic preferences to the table, admittedly in a more subtle manner reflecting the more traditional comedic style of Carmichael and Rock. The real point of this video is that it's not... Oh shit. Now, the real point of this video is that it's not just Bo. The revolution is beginning. A whole new wave of young comedians have begun to challenge the accepted norms of stand-up comedy and build on Bo's eclectic style in lots of really awesome ways. And I hope that this new generation of young comics distributed through platforms like Netflix and even YouTube will start to challenge some of the accepted norms of the stand-up comedy industry. In 2018, comic Drew Michael released one of the most experimental, eyebrow-raising comedy specials in recent memory. It spawned a number of think pieces from outlets like the New York Times and Rolling Stone, and somehow raised the ire of a number of comedy old heads. Why? He filmed it without an audience. Now, this hour-long special features Michael on what appears to be just a blank soundstage, reciting his jokes in a completely empty, silent room with no audience, no reaction shots, no laugh tracks, just staring directly into the camera. And this act does get quite personal and confronting at some point, so it's kind of a weird experience to watch, honestly. Now, I'm still not sure if I like it. I mean, the The format, while experimental and quite cool, lacks a lot of the kind of inter-joke breathing room that you get when an audience is there laughing with you, and a lot of the social proof that comes with an audience being in the kind of virtual room laughing with you. Nonetheless, I'm still super excited to see what he does next, and stoked to see the kind of established norms being challenged like that. Oh, and by the way, look who directed Michael's special. Now, I think the 2020s is going to be a decade of radical change for the stand-up industry, and that these new, young, streaming, distributed, digital, native comics are going to be what drives that change. In addition to Bo Burnham and Drew Michael, there are artists that I didn't even have time to talk about in depth for this video, like Chelsea Peretti and Dimitri Martin, who are making super eccentric, off-the-wall comedy. Performers like this, who aren't married to the old grimy comedy cellar look, will thrive in the coming years, and I sincerely hope that we get to see them deconstruct the comedy format with the same precision with which we see them deconstruct politics, love, and the rest of the modern world. Keep your eye out for these new era pioneers, if nothing else, just so that when they're playing stadiums in a few years, you can tell your friends you were there first.